So my name is Michelle Baladi, and I'm here today with my Jazz colleague, Margaret Lee. As Patrick mentioned, I'm the global development lead for our investigational compound that's in development for essential tremor that we refer to as JZP385. And Margaret is our head of neuroscience pharmacology at Jazz. I'm coming to you today from San Francisco, California, and Margaret's coming to you from the Boston area. And we're so excited to give a presentation to share updates on the development of Jazz's investigational medicine, JZP385 for essential tremor. This is a really exciting space for us because, as you've heard today, there is a significant unmet need in essential tremor. Despite essential tremor being the most common movement disorder, there has not been a new pharmacological drug developed in over 50 years. And we at Jazz are so fortunate to be able to contribute to advancing the science and research in this space with the ultimate goal of potentially bringing a new medication to patients living with essential tremor. So I do want to first start by sharing some information on who Jazz is. We are a global pharmaceutical company, and we're made up of about 3,000 employees that span from scientists to patient advocates to other types of professionals. But together, we focus on the development of life-changing medicines for people with serious diseases. And often those are diseases with very high unmet need, so that people can live their lives more fully. We always say at Jazz that patients are our North Star, and they help inspire us, they help guide us, they help contribute to the design of our development programs. I will now turn to my colleague, Margaret, who will actually walk you through the rationale to develop JZP385 for essential tremor.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle, for that introduction. Thanks to Patrick and also to the IETF. And especially to the participants, I want to thank you as well for taking some time on your Saturday to learn about essential tremor and treatments. And it's really my pleasure to tell you about our rationale for developing JZP385 in essential tremor. So we've heard from several of the other speakers that essential tremor is a common, progressive, and chronic movement disorder that can be highly debilitating and can really have significant impacts on a patient's ability to conduct normal activities of daily living. And as been discussed at this time, we really don't understand the exact mechanisms that underlie and cause ET. However, recently there's been studies and evidence to support that these abnormal rhythms in a network of brain regions really contribute to the underlying pathology of ET. So T-type calcium channels are a specific type of ion channel found in the brain that are highly expressed throughout this network of brain regions. And they play a key role in regulating those rhythms that are important for controlling movement. And abnormal oscillations in this network of brain regions are really thought to underlie these tremor movements. So given their key role in this process, T-type calcium channels are a potential target for essential tremor. In the next slide, I want to tell you a little bit more about JZP385. So as a reminder, JZP385 is an investigational drug, which means that its safety and efficacy has not yet been proven in humans, and it's not approved anywhere in the world. But this drug, as we'll talk to you more about, is being specifically designed to act and modulate the activity of T-type calcium channels. So these channels regulate the amount of calcium that flows into neurons. And as shown in the schematic on the slide, when these channels are overactivated, too much calcium flows into the cell, and this disrupts normal neuronal function, normal neuron signaling. So JZP385 preferentially works on these overactivated channels, stabilizing their function and restoring normal activity to the system without affecting other ion channels. So as I said, JZP385 is an investigational drug, and it has been evaluated in a prior phase 2A clinical study, which we call the TCOM study. And in that study, the TCOM study, JZP385 was shown to reduce tremor severity, and it improved activities of daily living in patients with moderate to severe essential tremor. It was well tolerated in the study, and most of the adverse events were mild to moderate and resolved. So the TCOM study provided initial proof of concept data to support the continued development of JZP385 in ET. And as we've been discussing about investigational drugs, an important part of the clinical development process is to confirm and expand on prior findings from previous clinical studies. So where exactly is JZP385 in the clinical development process? So just to give you a little background here, the drug development process starts with discovery and preclinical testing to ensure that a potential drug is safe and effective before it can ever be given to humans. But after this, clinical trials follow a typical series of phases, starting with small-scale early phase 1 studies, often in healthy volunteers, then progressing to mid-stage or phase 2 studies, typically in patients who have the disease, and then finally, with sufficient findings, moving to late-stage, larger scale phase 3 studies in patients. And at each stage during the clinical development process, we progressively learn more about the safety and effectiveness of a potential drug. Finally, we synthesize and collect all that information, analyze it, and present it to health authorities, such as the FDA or in Europe, the EMA, who will review and ultimately be the deciders of approval. So JZP385 is currently in phase 2 development. The prior phase 2A study of JZP385, or the TCOM study, has been completed, and you can see that indicated with the black text on the slide. And Jazz is currently conducting a phase 2B clinical study called the Everest study to continue this process of evaluating the safety and efficacy of JZP385 in participants with ET. So now I'd like to turn it back over to Michelle to tell us more about the Everest study.
Thanks so much, Margaret. So as Margaret said, JZP385 is currently in late stage phase 2B development. And we refer to the study as the Everest study. It's sort of an easier way to remember the name of our study. And, you know, the word Everest is really meant to symbolize the challenging yet hopeful journey that we are taking. And I want to first thank all of our partners that have helped us to design the Everest study. And you can see the number of various types of partners that we work with when we're designing a clinical study. And importantly, a key stakeholder partner in this are actually people living with essential tremor. At Jazz, it is incredibly important to us that we interact with patients when we're in the process of designing a study as much as possible to help us make our development programs more meaningful and impactful for patients. And I'll talk a little bit later about exactly how we did that for the Everest study. So the Everest study, the main objective is to evaluate how safe and effective JZP385 is in treating the symptoms of essential tremor when given in different doses compared to placebo. And some of the important information for any interested person to know about this trial is highlighted on the left-hand side of the screen here in this box. So as you've heard from our other sponsor presenters, the Everest study is a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. And really what that means is it's a type of trial design that we do to minimize any biases as much as possible. So if qualified, participants will be randomly assigned, and you can think of that like drawing straws, to one of 4 treatment groups. We have a placebo group, and then we have 3 different dose arms of JZP385. So essentially, if if you think about the number of arms and the randomization, a patient has a 1 in 4 chance or a 25% chance, for example, of getting randomized to the placebo arm. And a placebo is, of course, it's a treatment that looks like the investigational medication, but it contains an inactive substance. The treatment duration of the Everest study is 12 weeks, but total participation can be up to 19 weeks. And in terms of the number of clinic visits and phone calls from the doctor, you can expect up to 8 clinic visits. Most of these visits take around 2 to 3 hours. And then you can also expect around 8 phone calls from the doctor or the site staff. The number of participants that we're looking to randomize into the study is 400. So it is a large double-blind placebo-controlled study, and we're excited for this to be able to give us very robust information. And I want to talk a little bit about our primary endpoint, because the comment that I made about interacting with patients to help inform the design of our study sort of comes into play here. So we really love this quote that I have on the right-hand side of the screen from Dr. Janet Woodcock, who's the FDA Principal Deputy Commissioner. And you can see, I'll just read the quote for a second here. It says, it turns out that what is really bothering the patient and what is really bothering the doctor can be radically different things. Patients are true experts in their disease. And that's exactly how we at Jazz think about the patient community. They are our teachers, really, and the true experts of what it's like to live with the disease. And so the primary endpoint in a clinical study is really that key measure that will be used to determine if the drug works. And it's important to select a primary endpoint that represents signs and symptoms that are meaningful to patients. So at Jazz, we conducted some research directly with people living with essential tremor to understand the signs and symptoms that were most bothersome. And this helped to really support the selection of our primary endpoint, which I have on the screen here a little bit more detail on. Our primary endpoint represents items from tremor rating scales that focus on activities of daily living, like drinking from a glass and dressing oneself, and performance-based tasks like writing. So again, with the support of patient input, we believe that this is a very clinically meaningful way to measure if JZP385 has an effect in treating the symptoms of essential tremor. There are, of course, other efficacy assessments in this study that we think are important to measure. And I saw some comments or questions earlier on about understanding whether investigational products can have an impact on some other aspects of essential tremor, like the psychosocial impacts, like social embarrassment or sleep measures or those sorts of impacts beyond tremor. And we do incorporate scales and assessments into our Everest study to try to understand whether JZP385 has an impact beyond tremor and activities of daily living and performance-based tasks. So next, I want to talk about who is actually eligible to participate. And you heard about this concept from our other presenters about eligibility criteria in a clinical study, and every clinical study has this. It's an important component of the study design as it selects the specific population that is appropriate to measure the effects of the investigational drug. So the presentation of the eligibility criteria are designed with consideration to keeping patients safe, as well as selecting for the appropriate clinical presentation of a certain level of tremor severity. And that being said, we always try to broaden the eligibility criteria as much as possible so that the clinical study population is representative of what we refer to as the real world essential tremor population. For the Everest study in particular, the key inclusion criteria that are at the top of the screen here are that participants must be between the ages of 18 and 80. They must have a diagnosis of essential tremor. This can actually be confirmed during the screening process. So we sometimes hear from participants that they're not sure if they have a diagnosis of essential tremor. And this is something that can be done during the screening phase of the study. And then patients also have to have moderate to severe functional disability associated with tremor. And this goes back to the primary endpoint selection of the study being items that represent activities of daily living and performance-based tasks. We have to make sure to bring people into the study that have a certain level of functional impairment so that we can adequately assess whether JZP385 moves the needle on that or has an impact on that. In terms of the key exclusion criteria of the study, and again, these criteria are not the full list of eligibility criteria. You can always visit our trial posting on clinicaltrials.gov to see the full listing. But the key ones here are that for this specific study, patients must not have any other medical or neurological condition that may cause or explain the tremor. For example, if a patient also has Parkinson's disease, they would not be eligible for this study. And then also in this particular study, patients cannot have prior surgical intervention for tremor treatment. Thirdly, the use of anti-tremor medications is prohibited during the study for any patient who participates in the study and of course washes out of those medications. Once they exit and complete the study, they can resume those medications. And I just want to briefly touch on the reason for that last exclusion criterion. We get a lot of questions about that. And it is something that is in this specific study design. Assuming that we continue on to a phase 3 program, these eligibility criteria might not be exactly the same in a phase 3 program. But the reason that we are prohibiting use of anti-tremor medications in the Everest study is to remove any confounding factors that might interfere with our understanding of the true effect of JZP385. So where is the study being conducted? We actually are conducting this study in both the US and in Europe. We're in 3 different European countries, Germany, Poland, and Spain. And I obviously just have a visual schematic here of just the US representation. But again, please check our clinicaltrial.gov listing for a full list of actively enrolling sites. And what you can see on the map here is with the pins, these represent the sites that are currently actively enrolling. We are constantly adding sites into the study. So, check ct.gov often. And there are really nice advanced features, search features that you can use on ct.gov to enter in your zip code to see how far a trial site might be from your specific location. Should you qualify for this study, I do want to highlight that you may be compensated for your time and or travel. You do not need to have health insurance to participate in the study. There's no cost to all study medications, study-related tests and assessments, and appointments will be provided at no cost. So you've heard from others today about what to expect if you would like to find out more about a clinical study and or if you decide to participate. And I would like to also briefly touch on that because it's important to us at Jazz to raise awareness or help with the education of the clinical trial process, and particularly on the transparency of the process. Any interested participant should know that participating in a clinical trial is completely voluntary. If you are interested and you would like to learn more, there are important ways in which you can simply learn more, ask questions, and fully understand that particular clinical trial before making that personal decision of whether or not to participate. And one very important step in the process is what we refer to as the informed consent process. Every clinical study has this, and it's a document that allows you to make a truly informed decision about participating. You will not be officially enrolled into the study until signing this form. And due to the voluntary nature of clinical trial participation, even after signing, you can withdraw at any time for any reason. So to keep up to date on finding clinical trials, there are multiple resources, including your doctor, support groups like IETF, as well as clinicaltrials.gov, or you'll hear us refer to it as ct.gov. And as I mentioned previously, there is a handy advanced search option within ct.gov where when you're trying to find a clinical study, you can enter in your zip code to see if there are clinical sites close to you. And the tip that we always give is to check back often to ct.gov because clinical studies are adding new sites all the time. So I would like to end this presentation by playing a short 2-minute video for you that features our CEO and chairman of Jazz Pharmaceuticals, Bruce Kozad, as well as a patient living with ET, whose name is Mark. We have been so inspired learning from Mark, and we wanted to share the message with you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bruce Kozad, CEO of Jazz Pharmaceuticals. Thank you to all of you who are here today. We appreciate your engagement and your partnership. At Jazz, we have an unwavering commitment to essential tremor patients, caregivers, and those trying to make a difference in their lives. ET is the most common movement disorder, yet a new pharmacotherapy has not been approved in more than 50 years. One of our molecules, JZP385 or suvecaltamide, is in late-stage phase 2B clinical development, and we're hopeful that it can be a new treatment for patients with essential tremor. And while there's no guarantee of success, we're in this fight, trying our hardest to make a difference. At one of our company town hall meetings, we had an opportunity to hear from Mark Honeyman, who's been living with essential tremor for over 5 decades. He told us what it's like to live with ET and the many impacts that it's had on his life. He shared some heartbreaking moments. He told us about the shame he has faced. He told us about what essential tremor has taken from him over the years. But he also shared with us a story about hope, resilience, hard work, and gratitude. His words moved us so much that we wanted to feature a few of them here for you today.
For anybody who has essential tremor, I am keenly aware of how debilitating it can be, how demoralizing it can be, the toll that it takes on us both physically and emotionally. I'm living it. I've lived it for 45, 50 years. But what I want to say is, please don't give up hope. Keep pushing forward. I've crafted a life where I am deliriously happy, despite the fact that I have this condition. So hang on. Keep pushing forward. Make the most of your lives. Don't let this define you. Let what you do with the life you have define you.
So as Bruce and Mark said, thank you for being in this fight with us. Thank you for inspiring us, and please keep the hope. Thank you again to IETF, the conference organizers, and the IETF community, as well as my colleague Margaret for joining me in this presentation. If you would like to learn more about the Everest study, please visit www.evereststudy.com. And if you would like to share a story with Jazz, please contact us at sharemystory@jazzpharma.com.